Okay, today is 14 August. We're still in the 35th chapter of Samyutta Nikaya, Salayatana Samyutta. Now we come to Sutta 35.231. The Buddha said, monks, in regard to forms cognizable by the eye, if in any monk or nun lust still exists and has not been abandoned, if hatred still exists and has not been abandoned, if delusion still exists and has not been abandoned, then even trifling forms that enter into the range of the eye obsess the mind, not to speak of those that are prominent. For what reason? Because lust still exists and has not been abandoned, hatred still exists and has not been abandoned, delusion still exists and has not been abandoned. Similarly, for sounds, smells, tastes, touch, and thoughts. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that if we have lust, hatred, and delusion within, that any form comes before our eyes, they obsess the mind. We get obsessed by the form, similarly sounds, smells, etc. So even small forms like trifling, unimportant forms also, once we notice it, then we start thinking about it. So what more if they are prominent forms? That's why later you find the Buddha says not to pay attention. Then the Buddha says, suppose monks, there was a milk sap tree, an asata, or a banyan, or a pilaka, or an udambara, fresh, young, tender. If the man breaks it here and there with a sharp axe, would sap come out? Yes, member sir. For what reason? Because there is sap. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says, if the tree has got milk sap in it, you break off any part of it, now you cut it, then the milk sap will flow out, just like rubber tree. We are very familiar with rubber tree. So you cut any part of the rubber tree, the milk sap will flow out. So too monks, in regard to forms cognizable by the eye, even trifling forms that enter into the range of the eye obsess the mind, not to speak of those that are prominent. For what reason? Because lust still exists and has not been abandoned, hatred still exists and has not been abandoned, delusion still exists and has not been abandoned. The same in regards to sounds, smells, tastes, touch, and thoughts. Monks, in regard to forms cognizable by the eye, if in any monk or nun lust does not exist and has been abandoned, if hatred does not exist and has been abandoned, if delusion does not exist and has been abandoned, then even prominent forms that enter into the range of the eye do not obsess the mind, not to speak of those that are trifling. For what reason? Because lust does not exist and has been abandoned, hatred does not exist and has been abandoned, delusion does not exist and has been abandoned. Similarly, for sounds, smells, tastes, touch, and thoughts. Suppose monks, there was a milk sap tree, an asata, or a banyan, or a pilaka, or an udambara, dried up, desiccated, past its prime. If a man breaks it here and there with a sharp axe, would sap come out? No, venerable sir. For what reason? Because there is no sap. So too monks, in regard to forms cognizable by the eye, even prominent forms that enter into the range of the eye do not obsess the mind, not to speak of those that are trifling. For what reason? Because lust does not exist and has been abandoned. Hatred does not exist and has been abandoned. Delusion does not exist and has been abandoned. Similarly, for sounds, smells, tastes, touch, and thoughts. That's the end of the sutta. When the six sense objects impinge on our senses, how we react depends on how much of this lust, hatred, and delusion is within us. If you have strong lust, hatred, and delusion, then if the sense object is attractive, you will have lust for it, you have craving for it. and the craving gives rise to attachment, and the attachment gives rise to suffering. You want something, you cannot get it permanently, then you will have suffering. But on the other hand, somebody who has cultivated himself until lust, hatred and delusion has been eliminated, then whatever forms, whatever sounds, etc., come into his attention, it does not affect him because he does not have the lust, hatred and delusion. So it's very important that we, remove this poison inside us, these three poisons. So actually the problem is not outside there. The problem is not outside. The problem is inside. Sometimes we think the problem is outside. No, because of this, because of that. It's not because of this and because of that out there. Because of inside us. The next sutta, 35.232. On an occasion, the Venerable Sariputta and the Venerable Mahakotita were dwelling at Varanasi, the deer park at Isipatana. Then in the evening, the Venerable Mahakotita emerged from seclusion and approached the Venerable Sariputta. He exchanged greetings with the Venerable Sariputta, and when they had concluded their greetings and cordial talk, he sat down to one side and said to him, "How is it, friend Sariputta? Is the eye the fetter of forms? Or are forms the fetter of the eye? Is the ear the fetter of sounds? Or are sounds the fetter of the ear?" etc. For the other sense bases also. And Venerable Sariputta replied, "Friend Kotita, the eye is not the fetter of forms, nor are forms the fetter of the eye, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both, that is the fetter there. Similarly, the ear is not the fetter of sounds, nor are sounds the fetter of the ear, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both, that is the fetter there. Similarly, for the other sense bases. Suppose, friend, a black ox and a white ox were yoked together by a single harness or yoke. Would one be speaking rightly if one were to say, the black ox is the fetter of the white ox, the white ox is the fetter of the black ox? And Venerable Kotita said, "No, friend, the black ox is not the fetter of the white ox, nor is the white ox the fetter of the black ox, but rather the single harness or yoke by which the two are yoked together. That is the fetter there." And Venerable Sariputta said, "So too, friend, the eye is not the fetter of forms." As he repeated what he said, nor are forms the fetter of the eye, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both, that is the fetter there. The ear is not the fetter of sounds, nor are sounds the fetter of the ear, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both, that is the fetter there. Similarly for the other sense bases. If, friend, the eye were the fetter of forms, or if forms were the fetter of the eye, this living of the holy life could not be discerned for the complete destruction of suffering. But since the eye is not the fetter of forms, nor are forms the fetter of the eye, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both is the fetter there, the living of the holy life is discerned for the complete destruction of suffering. If, friend, the ear were the fetter of sounds, or if sounds were the fetter of the ear, this living of the holy life could not be discerned for the complete destruction of suffering. Similarly for the other sense bases. In this way too, friend, it may be understood how that is so. There exists in the Blessed One the eye. The Blessed One sees a form with the eye, yet there is no desire and lust in the Blessed One. The Blessed One is well liberated in mind. There exists in the Blessed One the ear. The Blessed One hears a sound with the ear. Yet there is no desire and lust in the Blessed One. Similarly for the other sense bases. In this way, friend, it can be understood how the eye is not the fetter of forms, nor are forms the fetter of the eye, but rather the desire and lust that arise there in dependence on both is the fetter there. Similarly for the other sense bases. That's the end of the sutta. So here, you see, for each sense base, if we take, for example, the eye When you have the I and forms come before the I, then I consciousness arises. And the coming together of the three, the I, the forms, and the I consciousness is the making of contact. When there is contact, feeling arises. And if the feeling is a pleasant feeling, then there is craving for it. If the feeling is an unpleasant feeling, then there is aversion towards it. So our mind is moved by craving and aversion depending on the object. And sometimes if the feeling that arises is neither pleasant nor unpleasant, then then there is no craving and no aversion. In fact, generally people, if the feeling is neither pleasant nor unpleasant, then people become ignorant of it, not aware of it. So the problem here is not the I, the problem is not the forms, the problem is the feeling that arises, giving rise to craving or aversion. So a mind that is untrained, undeveloped, it is moved by the external sense objects. The external sense objects either give you craving or give you aversion, leading to hatred. So it's because that is an undeveloped mind. So it's very important to develop our mind so that whatever impinges on our six sense basis, that we don't react in an unwholesome way, in an unskillful way. If we react in an unskillful way, for example, we crave for a beautiful form, then since you cannot have that form all the time, then suffering will come. But if you realize the nature of the six sense bases, that everything is impermanent, there's no happiness to be found from clinging to anything, then you don't react, then you will not have suffering. So the desire and lust, that is the factor, that is the factor that binds us in samsara. The next sutta is 35.234. On one occasion, the Venerable Ananda and the Venerable Udayi were dwelling at Kosambi in Gosita's park. Then in the evening, the Venerable Udayi emerged from seclusion and approached the Venerable Ananda. He exchanged greetings with the Venerable Ananda, and when they had concluded their greetings and cordial talk, he sat down to one side and said, "Friend Ananda, in many ways the nature of this body has been declared, disclosed, and revealed by the Blessed One thus. For such a reason, this body is not self. Is it possible to explain the nature of this consciousness in a similar way, to teach, proclaim, establish, disclose, analyze and elucidate it thus? For such a reason, this consciousness is not self." Stop here for a moment. So here, Venerable Udayi says that the Buddha has taught that this body is not self. Is it possible in a similar way to say, to explain that consciousness is not self? These two things, the body and consciousness or mind, the Buddha says it's much easier to see that the body is not self because we can see the body changing year by year as you grow older. And then also you can see not only your body, you can see your parents' body, your grandparents' body, your relatives and all that. They grow old, they become sick and they die. So it's much easier to see that the body is not the self. But very hard to see the mind or consciousness as not the self. That's why here is asking Venerable Ananda. And Venerable Ananda said, "It is possible, friend Udayi. Doesn't I consciousness arise in dependence on the I and forms?" And he said, "Yes, friend. If the cause and condition for the arising of I consciousness would cease completely and totally without remainder, could I consciousness be discerned? No, friend. In this way, friend, this has been declared, disclosed and revealed by the Blessed One thus. For such a reason, this consciousness is not self." Let's stop here for a moment. So here, Ananda says, I consciousness arises on condition that two things are present. The I must be there. forms must come before the I. With these two conditions, I consciousness arises. So since I consciousness arises dependent on these two things, the I and forms, and these two things, the I and forms, are also impermanent, right? So when they cease, so if you say that I consciousness is the self, then when the I and the form cease, that means the condition for I consciousness to arise ceases, then naturally I consciousness will cease. So if I consciousness ceases, then where is the self? Right? If there's a self, it must exist all the time. But if it arises and then passes away, arises and passes away, it cannot be the self. The idea of the self, atta, is something that is permanent, that is never changing, that there is a core, there is a core that unchanging, which you can identify as the self. But if it changes and it can disappear, then how can it be the self? Right? Nanda is trying to say, for the reason that I consciousness is dependent on conditions, and when the conditions cease, then I consciousness also must cease. So it cannot be, it is not self. Similarly, ear consciousness arises in dependence on the ear and sounds. So in a similar way, ear consciousness also is not the self when the ear and sounds cease. And similarly for the other senses. In this way, friend, it has been declared, disclosed and revealed by the Blessed One thus. For such a reason, this consciousness is not self. Suppose, friend, a man needing hardwood, seeking hardwood, wandering in search of hardwood, would take a sharp axe and enter a forest. There he would see the trunk of a large plantain tree, that means a banana tree, straight, fresh, without a fruit but core. He would cut it down at the root, cut off the crown, and unroll the coil. As he unrolls the coil, he would not find even softwood, let alone hardwood. So too, a monk does not recognize either a self or anything belonging to a self in these six bases for contact, these six sense bases. Since he does not recognize anything thus, he does not cling to anything in the world. Not clinging, he is not agitated. Being unagitated, he personally attains Nibbana. He understands, destroyed is birth, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being. That's the end of the sutta. So the Buddha says, if a monk sees that the six sense bases and all the things connected with the six sense bases are impermanent and not self, it means that the whole world is impermanent and not self, because the whole world exists in the six sense bases, the six consciousness. So when he does not cling to anything in the world, then he becomes disenchanted, and becomes dispassionate, and he attains liberation. 35.235. Monks, I will teach you a Dhamma exposition on the theme of burning. Listen to that. And what, monks, is the Dhamma exposition on the theme of burning? It would be better, monks, for the eye faculty to be lacerated by a red-hot iron pin, burning, blazing and glowing, than for one to grasp the sign through the features, to grasp the sign and the features in a form cognizable by the eye. For if consciousness should stand tied to gratification in the sign or in the features, and if one should die on that occasion, it is possible that one will go to one of two destinations, hell or the animal realm. Having seen this danger, I speak thus. I'll stop here for a moment. So the Buddha says, instead of using the eye to grasp the signs and the features in any form that you see, it is better to take a red-hot iron pin and hack or poke the eye until it cannot see, because The Buddha says, if you use eye consciousness and you see forms that are pleasing and you are satisfied in the signs and features of the form and you cling to it, then if you die at that moment, you'll go to rebirth in hell or the animal realm. So dangerous is the clinging to the six senses, six sense objects. And the Buddha continued, "You would be better monks for the ear faculty to be lacerated by a sharp iron stake, burning, blazing and glowing, than for one to grasp the sign and the features in sound cognizable by the ear. For if consciousness should stand tied to gratification in the sign or in the features, and if one should die on that occasion, it is possible that one will go to one of two destinations, hell or the animal realm. Having seen this danger, I speak thus. You would be better monks for the nose faculty to be lacerated by a sharp nail cutter, burning, blazing and glowing, but for one to grasp the sign and the features in odor cognizable by the nose. For if consciousness should stand tied to gratification in the sign or in the features, and if one should die on that occasion, it is possible that one will go to one of two destinations, hell or the animal realm. Having seen this danger, I speak thus. It will be better monks for the tongue faculty to be lacerated by a sharp razor, burning, blazing and glowing, than for one to grasp the sign and the features in taste cognizable by the tongue. For if consciousness should stand tied to gratification in the sign or in the features, and if one should die on that occasion, it is possible that one will go to one of two destinations, hell or the animal realm. Having seen this danger, I speak thus. It would be better monks for the body faculty to be lacerated by a sharp spear, burning, blazing and glowing, than for one to grasp the signs and the features in a tactile object, cognizable by the body. For if consciousness should stand tied to gratification in the sign or in the features, and if one should die on that occasion, it is possible that one will go to one of two destinations, hell or the animal realm. Having seen this danger, I speak thus. It would be better monks to sleep, for sleep, I say, is barren for the living, fruitless for the living, insensibility for the living, than to think such thoughts as would induce one who has come under their control to bring about a schism in the Sangha. Having seen this danger, I speak thus. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying it's better to destroy all the six sense organs than to use them to enjoy sensual objects, because if you use your sense organs to enjoy sensual objects and you cling to them, at the moment when you die you are still attached to them, then it's possible for you to go to hell or the animal realm. Except the last one, this last one is not to enjoy, but if you use your mind to think unwholesome thoughts, for example, to split the Sangha of monks, cause a schism, then it's better not to use the mind and go to sleep better. In regard to these monks, the learned noble disciple reflects thus: leave off lacerating the eye faculty with a red-hot iron pin, burning, blazing and glowing. Let me attend only to this. So the eye is impermanent, the forms are impermanent, eye consciousness is impermanent, eye contact is impermanent. Whatever feeling arises with eye contact as condition, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, that too is impermanent. Leave off lacerating the ear faculty with a sharp iron stick, burning, blazing and glowing. Let me attend only to this. So the ear is impermanent, sounds are impermanent, ear consciousness is impermanent. Ear contact is impermanent. Whatever feeling arises with ear contact as condition, that too is impermanent. Leave off lacerating the nose faculty with a sharp nail cutter, burning, blazing and glowing. Let me attend only to this. So the nose is impermanent, odors are impermanent, nose consciousness is impermanent, nose contact is impermanent. Whatever feeling arises with nose contact as condition, that too is impermanent. Leave off lacerating the tongue faculty with a sharp razor, burning, blazing and glowing. Let me attend only to this. So the tongue is impermanent, tastes are impermanent, tongue consciousness is impermanent, tongue contact is impermanent. Whatever feeling arises with tongue contact as condition, that too is impermanent. Leave off lacerating the body faculty with a sharp spear, burning, blazing and glowing. Let me attend only to this. So the body is impermanent, tactile objects are impermanent. Body consciousness is impermanent. Body contact is impermanent. Whatever feeling arises with body contact as condition, that too is impermanent. Leave off sleeping. Let me attend only to this. So the mind is impermanent. Mental phenomena or thoughts are impermanent. Mind consciousness is impermanent. Mind contact is impermanent. Whatever feeling arises with mind contact as condition, that too is impermanent. Seeing thus, monks, the learned noble disciple experiences revulsion towards the eye, forms, eye consciousness, eye contact. Whatever feeling arises with eye contact as condition. And similarly for the other 6 sense bases, so he experienced revulsion towards the 6 sense bases, the 6 sense objects, the 6 sense consciousness, contact, and the feeling that arises. Experiencing revulsion, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it's liberated. He understands, destroyed is birth, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being. This, monks, is the Dhamma exposition on the theme of burning. So here the Buddha says, instead of going to the extreme step of destroying your 6 sense faculties, the Buddha says, learned noble disciple having wisdom should only attend to the fact that the 6 sense bases are impermanent, the 6 sense objects are impermanent, the 6 sense consciousness are impermanent, the 6 sense contacts are impermanent, the feeling that arises the 6 sense bases are also impermanent. So when you realize that they are all impermanent, that means everything in the world is impermanent. So you feel, the noble disciple will feel revulsion, disenchanted with the 6 sense bases, with everything in the world. And then experiencing disenchantment, he becomes dispassionate, and that will lead to liberation. This reminds me, like in India, a lot of ascetics, they practice these Dhutanga practices, the ascetic practices to suffer, they think, to wear away their sins, wear away their evil karma, they think. So they do things like going naked, do things like living in the forest, living off the fruits that fall in the forest and the roots of trees and all that, plants. That is one extreme for people who don't understand the Dhamma. The Buddha himself went through all these extreme conditions, like starving himself until he ate 1 grain of rice a day. Later he relaxed and practiced the middle way and attained enlightenment. And after he attained enlightenment, he told his disciples not to practice all these unbeneficial ascetic practices. Instead, to direct your mind in the right way, like contemplating impermanence, contemplating suffering, contemplating not self. That is the right way. Without having to suffer so much, you can attain enlightenment. So similarly here, this sutta, if you go to one extreme, because you think that the 6 sense bases is the cause, because of contact at the 6 sense bases, then feeling arises, and feeling gives rise to suffering when you cling to it, right? So if a person doesn't have much wisdom, he thinks the cause of all the suffering is the 6 sense bases. So go and destroy the 6 sense bases, do something burning and burn it out, burn out the eye, burn out the ear, the nose and all that. The Buddha says you don't have to go to that extreme. Simple way is just to contemplate impermanence in all these 6 sense bases. Then you don't become attached to it, then you can attain liberation. Next sutta is 35.236. The Buddha said, monks, when there are hands, picking up and putting down are discerned, are seen. When there are feet, coming and going are discerned. When there are limbs, bending and stretching are discerned. When there is the belly, hunger and thirst are discerned. So too monks, when there is the eye, pleasure and pain arise internally with eye contact as condition. When there is the ear, pleasure and pain arise internally with ear contact as condition. Similarly, when there is nose, also pleasure and pain arise. When there is tongue, pleasure and pain arise. When there is body, pleasure and pain arise. When there is mind, pleasure and pain arise internally with contact as condition. When monks, there are no hands. Picking up and putting down are not discerned. When there are no feet, coming and going are not discerned. When there are no limbs, bending and stretching are not discerned. When there is no belly, hunger and thirst are not discerned. So too monks, when there is no eye, no pleasure and pain arise internally with eye contact as condition. When there is no ear, no pleasure and pain arise internally. When there is no nose, when there is no tongue, then when there is no body, then when there is no mind, no pleasure and pain arise internally with contact as condition. That's the end of the sutta. So the six sense organs is the cause for pleasure and pain to arise. If we continue to have the six sense organs, then pleasure and pain we continue to experience. So when you understand that the suffering is not worth the pleasure that you get, then only you become disenchanted with the six sense bases. Because however much pleasure you can get from the six sense bases is never enough, never satisfied. And yet the pain when you experience through the six sense bases, the pain is unbearable. So that's why I say the pain that you experience is not worth the pleasure that you get out of the six sense bases. One day when we realize it, then we become disenchanted. The next sutta is quite a famous sutta, 35.238. Monks, suppose there were 4 vipers of fierce heat and deadly venom. Then a man would come along wanting to live, not wanting to die, desiring happiness and averse to suffering. They would tell him, "Good man, these 4 vipers are of fierce heat and deadly venom. From time to time they must be lifted up. From time to time they must be bathed. From time to time they must be fed. From time to time they must be laid to rest. But if one or another of these vipers ever becomes angry with you, then, good man, you will meet death or deadly suffering. Do whatever has to be done, good man." Then monks, afraid of the 4 vipers of fierce heat and deadly venom, that man would flee in one direction or another. And they would tell him, "Good man, 5 murderous enemies are pursuing you, thinking, wherever we see him, we will take his life right on the spot. Do whatever has to be done, good man." Then monks, afraid of the 4 vipers of fierce heat and deadly venom, and of the 5 murderous enemies, that man would flee in one direction or another. They would tell him, "Good man, a 6th murderer, an intimate companion, is pursuing you with drawn sword, thinking, wherever I see him, I will cut off his head right on the spot. Do whatever has to be done, good man." Then monks, afraid of the 4 vipers of fierce heat and deadly venom, and of the 5 murderous enemies, and of the 6th murderer, the intimate companion with drawn sword, that man would flee in one direction or another. He would see an empty village. Whatever house he enters is void, deserted, empty. Whatever pot he takes hold of is void, hollow, empty. He would tell him, "Good man, just now, village attacking dacoits will raid this empty village. Do whatever has to be done, good man." Then monks, afraid of the 4 vipers of fierce heat and deadly venom, and of the 5 murderous enemies, and of the 6th murderer, the intimate companion with drawn sword, and of the village attacking dacoits or bandits, that man would flee in one direction or another. He would see a great expanse of water, whose near shore was dangerous and fearful, and whose further shore was safe and free from danger. But there would be no ferry boat or bridge for crossing over from the near shore to the far shore. Then the man would think, There is this great expanse of water, whose near shore is dangerous and fearful, but whose further shore is safe and free from danger. But there is no ferry boat or bridge for crossing over. Let me collect grass, twigs, branches, and foliage, and bind them together into a raft, so that by means of that raft, making an effort with my hands and feet, I can get safely across to the far shore. Then the man would collect grass, twigs, branches, and foliage, and bind them together into a raft, so that by means of that raft, making an effort with his hands and feet, he would get safely across to the far shore. Stand crossed over, gone beyond, the Brahmana stands on high ground. I have made up this simile, monks, in order to convey a meaning. I stop here before I explain what the Buddha says. So this man, 4 vipers, very poisonous. He has to take care of these 4 vipers. They are thrust onto him, and he has to lift them up from time to time. They must be bathed from time to time. They must be fed. They must be given some rest and all that. And if you make any one of them angry, once they bite you, either you die or you'll be half dead, suffering from so much pain. And then on top of that, 5 enemies are chasing him. And if they catch up with him, they will take his life. So he has to run. But he has to carry these 4 vipers on his body. They have already put around his body. Then he hears that 6th murderer, an old friend, is also chasing him, wanting to kill him. So he has to run again. Then he comes to a village. And that village is deserted. Nobody, all the houses are empty. He enters every house also empty. And then even when he goes to the kitchen, takes up all the pots also empty. And then suddenly he hears some bandits will come and raid this empty village. And then he's afraid of the bandits, they may kill him. Then he runs again. Then he keeps running until he comes to water. And this side is very fearful. So many people want to kill him. Even the snake also can kill him. But the other side, the other shore is safe. So he collects grass and twigs and branches and leaves and binds them into a raft. And making great effort with his hands and feet, he managed to cross over to the other shore where it's safe. I have made up this simile, monks, in order to convey a meaning. This is the meaning here. The 4 vipers of fierce heat and deadly venom. This is a designation for the 4 great elements. The earth element, water element, heat element, the air element. Let's stop here for a moment. So these 4 vipers is actually our own body. Our own body is made up of these 4 elements. And we have to take care of our body. We have no choice. We have to bathe our body. We have to feed our body. We have to brush our teeth. Go and do our toilet. And if we don't take proper care of the body, if we have too much wind, then we will suffer. If we have too much heat, for example, you take too much curry, and then also you will suffer. Or if the weather is no good, also you will suffer. And to the extent that you may even die if you don't take proper care of your body. So these 4 vipers represent our body, the 4 elements in our body. The 5 murderous enemies, that is a designation for the 5 aggregates of attachment. That is, the body aggregate, the feeling aggregate, perception aggregate, volition aggregate, consciousness aggregate. Stop here for a moment. So these 5 aggregates that we attach to as I and mine, they are also murderous enemies. Why? Because we attach to them, then when the body dies, the body and the mind dies, we don't think that the body dies, you think I die, right? So by attaching to them, they murder us. When we die, it's not that the 5 aggregates die, we think I die, that's why they are our murderous enemies. This we read before in a previous sutta. Venerable Sariputta giving this simile, this as parable to Venerable Yamaka. The sixth murderer, the intimate companion with drawn sword. This is a designation for delight and lust. I'll stop here for a moment. This delight and lust, because of delight and lust, we think we enjoy, we are happy, we enjoy the world. So this delight and lust is intimate companion. But because of delight and lust, we have the self. Once you delight in things of the world, you think I enjoy. So that I, the ego, the conceit arises. So once you have the conceit, when the body dies, you feel I die. So this delight and lust is also a murderer. Because you attach to delight and lust, you feel that one day I die. The empty village, this is a designation for the six internal sense bases. Six internal sense bases are our six organs. If monks, a wise, competent, intelligent person, examines them by way of the eye, they appear to be void, hollow, empty. If he examines them by way of the ear, nose, tongue, body and mind, they appear to be void, empty, hollow. So this empty village are our six sense organs. If you look into our six sense organs, there is no self, there is no anything that is permanent, there is no core. So that's why it's called the empty village. Village attacking the dacoits, this is a designation for the six external sense bases. The eye, monks, is attacked by agreeable and disagreeable forms. The ear is attacked by sounds, the nose attacked by odors, the tongue attacked by taste, the body attacked by touch, and the mind attacked by thoughts. So these six sense objects here called this external sense bases. They keep attacking us, impinging on our six sense bases, and giving rise to pleasant and unpleasant feelings. So that's why they are called village attacking bandits. They attack the village, the empty village, the six sense organs. The great expanse of water, this is a designation for the four floods. The flood of sensuality, the flood of existence, the flood of views, and the flood of ignorance. This flood we have to cross. Give up sensuality, give up the craving for existence, give up all views, and give up ignorance. Then we have to, this is the great expanse of water, then we have to cross. The near shore, which is dangerous and fearful, this is a designation for identity, or identity view. Once you have an identity view, you identify yourself with the body and the mind, then it is dangerous and fearful. You always feel you have to protect this self from the moment we are born until we die, or every day we are trying to protect the self. The further shore, which is safe and free from danger, that is a designation for Nibbana. That is our goal of the holy life. The raft, this is a designation for the Noble Eightfold Path, that is right view, right thoughts, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right recollection, and right concentration. Making an effort with hands and feet, this is a designation for arousing of energy. That means you make effort to cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path, that is struggling with your hands and feet. Cross over, gone beyond, the Brahmana stands on high ground. This is a designation for the Arahant. The Brahmana, the meaning is a holy man. He stands on safe ground. That's the Arahant who is liberated. So this sutta is quite interesting. As we go through life, we are being chased by all these murderers. That's why every day we are so frightened. Every day we are trying to protect ourselves. So we are scheming, a lot of people, to earn your livelihood, how to make enough money to survive, always thinking. So that is life. The next sutta, 35.239. Monks, by possessing three qualities, a monk lives full of happiness and joy in this very life, and he has laid a foundation for the destruction of the asavas. What are the three? He is one who guards the doors of the sense faculties, who is moderate in eating, and who is devoted to wakefulness. This one, we have come across another sutta which mentions exactly these three things. When monk told, I think Venerable Sariputta, that his Kuti companion has disrobed, and then the Venerable Sariputta says, it's natural for him to disrobe because he never cultivates these three things. So these three things are very important. And how monks is a monk one who guards the doors of the sense faculties? Here, having seen a form with the eye, a monk does not grasp its signs and features, since if he left the eye faculty unrestrained, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief, here it says displeasure, might invade him. He practices the way of its restraint. He guards the eye faculty. He undertakes the restraint of the eye faculty. Similarly for the other sense bases. So here, one who guards the doors of his sense faculties, when an external object, in this case for the eye is the form, when you see a form, practicing monk should not take too much notice of its general signs and its detailed features. If you start observing too clearly, then feelings arise and unwholesome states arise in the mind. So if he did not restrain the eye faculty, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief might invade him. This covetousness means when he sees something pleasant, he craves for it, he wants to possess it, that is covetousness. And if he cannot get it, then he will have grief. Here it says displeasure. So either he is greedy for that thing, the object of the six sense bases, or if he cannot get it, then grief will invade his mind. So if he doesn't want these two states, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief, then he restrains the sense faculties. Suppose monks, a chariot harnessed to thoroughbreds, was standing ready on even ground at a crossroads, with a goat on hand. Then a skillful trainer, a charioteer of horses to be tamed, would mount it, and taking the reins in his left hand and the goat in his right, would drive away and return by any route he wants, whenever he wants. So too, a monk trains in protecting these six sense faculties, trains in controlling them, trains in taming them, trains in pacifying them. It is in this way, monks, that a monk guards the doors of the sense faculties. Let's stop here for a moment. So here, the Buddha has given a very beautiful simile. Just like a skillful horse driver, he gets up on the chariot, and he can control the horses so well, they can go any direction he wants, any speed he wants. So similarly, the Buddha says we should control our six sense organs so that they are tame, so that they listen to us instead of being uncontrolled. Usually, for a lot of people, our six sense organs are uncontrolled because of habit. And how monks is a monk moderate in eating? Here, reflecting wisely, a monk takes food neither for amusement nor for intoxication, nor for the sake of physical beauty and attractiveness, but only for the support and maintenance of this body, for ending discomfort, and for assisting the holy life, considering, thus I shall terminate the old feeling and not arouse a new feeling, and I shall be healthy, blameless, and live in comfort. Stop here for a moment. Here, terminate. So when he eats food, it's just to terminate the old feeling of hunger and not arouse a new feeling of greed. Just as a person anoints a wound only for the purpose of enabling it to heal, or just as one greases an axle only for the sake of transporting a load, so a monk reflecting wisely takes food for assisting the holy life. It is in this way, monks, that a monk is moderate in eating. Stop here for a moment. So here, a person who practices moderation in eating, how can we say what? Chu liang. Then he understands that the food we take is only for a purpose of maintaining our body, so that we can live a useful life, skillful life, and not become greedy on account of food. And how monks is a monk devoted to wakefulness? Here during the day, while walking back and forth and sitting, a monk purifies his mind of obstructive states. In the first watch of the night, while walking back and forth and sitting, he purifies his mind of obstructive states. In the middle watch of the night, he lies down on the right side in the lion's posture, with one foot overlapping the other, mindful and clearly comprehending, after noting in his mind the idea of rising. After rising in the last watch of the night, or walking back and forth and sitting, he purifies his mind of obstructive states. It is in this way, monks, that a monk is devoted to wakefulness. Monks, it is by possessing these three qualities that a monk lives full of happiness and joy in this very life, and he has laid the foundation for the destruction of the asavas. That means attainment of arahanthood. So you see this last part, devoted to wakefulness, a monk's duty actually is to practice meditation, practically most of the time that he can, most of the daytime, and at night also, except when he has to rest during the middle watch. So the Buddha standard is that his monks only rest for 4 hours during the middle watch, from 10 p.m. until 2 a.m. This is quite a high standard. If our mind is not strong enough, it's very difficult to do that. But if you practice like the Buddha advised, walking and sitting the whole day and much of the night, then the mind becomes concentrated, and we need less sleep. So you see, a monk's lifestyle, according to the Buddha, is to spend his days and nights practicing. Of course, the Buddha also stressed that he should learn the Sutta and the Vinaya. So whenever he has some time, he should learn the Sutta and Vinaya. But the Buddha says, even when we learn the Sutta and Vinaya, we still have to devote some time to practice meditation to clear our mind of these unwholesome states. So that is the work of a monk, the lifestyle of a monk, to sit and walk, practice meditation until he can attain good samadhi. When he attains good samadhi, then with the understanding of the suttas, the Buddha's teachings, then he can attain liberation. So these are the two cornerstones of a monk's life: meditation and studying the Sutta Vinaya. Studying of the Sutta Vinaya can be said to be vipassana, because Buddha always stress that you need samatha and vipassana for liberation. Samatha is the cultivation of samadhi, the jhanas. Vipassana is contemplation on the Sutta Vinaya, or sometimes Buddha calls it Dhamma Vinaya. But in the suttas, it is defined as the suttas and the Vinaya. So I'll stop here for tonight. Anything to discuss? I'm not too sure about that, but these two terms seem to be interchangeable in the suttas. But when you talk about lobha, greed, one of the strongest greed we have is raga, lust. Or maybe you can consider lust as an extreme form of greed. Lust not only for sensual pleasure, lust for other things like food.
I don't chit-chat. How does it affect one's samadhi?
Oh, I do chit-chat. When you start chatting, then when you're finished with the chatting, then it stays in your mind. That's why you start thinking about it. So also it wastes your time. When we cultivate samadhi, we should try to practice it all the time. So the Satipatthana Samyutta, where they explain how to practice Satipatthana, is they give the simile of the most beautiful girl of the land coming out, and then all the men start clapping and shouting, the most beautiful girl, and more men come out. Then they ask her to sing and dance, And when she sang and danced, a lot of men came to clap and see. So an ordinary guy came along, and he was caught and forced to carry a bowl of oil filled to the brim. And he was told that he has to walk in between the crowd of people with this bowl of oil. And a man walked behind him with a long drawn sword and told him that if he spills the oil, even one drop of it, they will chop off his head. So that being so, he has to pay attention to that oil, that bowl of oil, all the time, without, he dare not even look left and right, he dare not look at the beautiful girl. So that is the way the Buddha indicated in this sutta, this simile, how to practice satipatthana. So when we practice satipatthana, it is undivided attention on your meditation object and all the time, and that will lead to samadhi. So the meditation, that's why meditation is a 24 hours a day practice. The mind should always be on the meditation object. That's why satipatthana, I think the proper translation is intense state of recollection. Intense state of recollection where the mind does not go to anything else. It's all the time on one object. And satipatthana, if you practice it in the right way, the sutta says it will definitely lead you to samadhi. If you practice it in the wrong way, satipatthana, you will not attain samadhi. That is given in the Satipatthana Samyutta. You put the mic to your mouth.
In the video watch, they say here, putting lie down on the right side in the lying posture, with one foot overlapping the other, mindful and clearly comprehending after looking in his mind the idea of rising. What does it mean by mindful and clear comprehending after looking in the mind?
This one very often the interpretation is not very correct. Actually that word, mindful and clearly comprehending, is sati sampajanya. Sati sampajanya. So sati is recollection of your meditation object. Sampajanya is awareness, mindfulness. So actually the Buddha's teaching in this sutta, that even when a monk goes to rest during the middle watch, he does not really fall asleep. He still practices sati. That's why the first meditation taught by the Buddha was the 32 parts of the body. A monk recites the 32 parts of the body. So when he goes to rest, he still recites the 32 parts of the body. He still keeps the sati. And he tries to maintain his mindfulness by not falling asleep. So he is practicing mindfulness as well as sati, recollection of the meditation object. That's why practicing this way, the Buddha's disciples became mindful 24 hours a day. That's why Arahant is said to be mindful 24 hours a day. He has sati 24 hours a day.
They do not fall asleep.
They try not to. Of course, if you have not attained very high samadhi, the mind is not strong, the mind will fall asleep. But for the monks who have attained very high samadhi, the mind is so strong, they don't need much sleep. In fact, in the suttas, the Buddha says there are different postures for resting. You have the lion posture, like this one, resting on the right side. Then you have the luxurious posture, resting on the left side. And then you have the ghost posture, like most people sleep with the back on the ground, sleeping with your face facing the sky. That is a ghost posture. But the Buddha says the Tathagata posture is to enter the jhanas. So the Buddha and his Arahant disciples, they don't sleep, they enter jhana. That's how they get their rest. And they enter jhana, they charge their body. It's like charging the battery.
What does it mean by after looking in his mind the idea of rising?
That means when he goes to rest, he makes a note that he should get up after 4 hours. And then he maintains his sati sampajanya. He makes a determination, say, I'll get up after 4 hours. And then he continues with his sati sampajanya. He does not relax on his sati sampajanya even when he sleeps,
I think when Mama practices sati sampajanya, or rather Salayatana, he sort of withdrawn into his own mind.
Yes.
Which means to say that he is to cut away all the satsuma.
Yes.
That he would appear that he's not bothered about things outside him.
Oh, definitely.
And then to say that he is there, he's not bothered and then he cut off. And then to say that he is doing other things, and then he tends to forget about whatever the world is.
Yes, yes. That is when he is practicing. When he is not practicing, he has monks also have got duties. We find in the Vinaya books, during the Buddha's time, the monks built kutis. So that's why, like here in the sutta says that when the monk sees something or hears a sound or smells an odor, he does not grasp at the signs and the features. He does not want to take too much notice. His mind goes inwards. And he cultivates his concentration until he's so strong that anytime the six sense objects impinge on his consciousness, his mind is not easily shaken, solid as a rock inside. Say again. Settled on the body. Centered on the body. This mindfulness centered on the body or mindfulness of the body refers to being mindful of the body. But this body can be the physical body, it can also be the breath body. So like anapanasati is mindfulness of the breath body. But why mindfulness of the body or centered on the body is so important? Because if we are not mindful, the mind runs away, right? We start daydreaming. When you start thinking and daydreaming, you forgot that you are sitting here in meditation. You forgot that you are this body, But the moment you are mindful of this body, then the mind cannot run away as long as you are mindful of the body. So it is very important to be mindful of the body, especially when you are practicing meditation and the mind is having a lot of sloth and torpor, and you're almost going to fall asleep. So what you do is you can move your finger a bit. You do a chant, arahang, 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 arahang. So you move the right finger and in synchronization with your chanting. So when you chant arahang, you move the right finger at the same time. When you chant arahang, you move the left finger at the same time. So as long as you are aware of some part of your body, the mind cannot run. So it's a very good way of staying awake. That's why some people use the chanting beats. Because you use the chanting beats, you keep moving your finger, you won't fall asleep. Of course, when you're tired, you stop moving, then you fall asleep. So mindfulness of the body prevents your mind from running away, losing your mindfulness. May stop here for tonight.